Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and happy Tuesday to each and every one of you. You know, it's pretty weird, this start to November. I mean, I'm currently in the lower Great Lakes, as many of you guys know. I live within that region vicinity, and I did something today that typically I don't do at the start of November. I went on a run, but I ran in shorts. Right? I mean, that's crazy to think. I mean, just think the last couple of years in the Midwest, it's been a little bit more seasonal when it came to our temperatures, but boy, what a bizarre start we've had to this fall season. I mean, as we kind of talked about here over the last couple of videos, I touched on it, I think, in the first video that I did back. We had snow on Halloween in Chicago, right? Now, flash forward to what is now November the 7th, we're talking about temperatures that are in the 60s, if not pushing 70. And for many areas to the south, like say central Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, we could be seeing temperatures in the 80s by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon, which would be essentially 20 to 30 degrees above average. Pretty crazy to think about, right? And as I've also talked about in previous videos, not recently, but I think in the past, one of the things in meteorology that I think a lot of people, including myself, tend to make the mistake of is saying that there's nothing going on right now, right? I mean, if you're looking at this satellite, we have a ridge of high pressure that's sitting in the central United States. We got some cloud cover out here in the Rockies. Yeah, the Rockies are getting some snowfall in association with that trough digging down south. Yes, in the Northeast, you have a cold front moving through, bringing some showers and some precipitation that way. But overall, you could easily say that there's nothing going on. So therefore, that's it. That's the end of the video, right? No. No, it's not. That would be a terrible way to end the video because there are things happening right now as we just highlighted, but there's also going to be things happening in our weather space over the next 24 to 48 hours. Take a look here at the Canadian province of Saskatchewan. I know we don't talk about you guys a lot, but you are going to be the focus of this video today, and that's because we have a shortwave trough axis that's negatively tilted right over southern Saskatchewan and even into portions of northern Montana. That system is critical because that is going to be the one that eventually dives to the southeast and impacts places like northern Minnesota, the UP of Michigan, and then eventually getting back towards Ontario, Quebec, and for even folks in New England and the Northeast. Why is this significant? Well, you're going to see why in a moment. The current weather pattern we're in, at least as of today, nothing that's going on today, well, that nothing is because of the zonal flow we're seeing across the United States. This has been the focus of our discussion here through the previous videos we provided you guys. And this zonal flow is a lot of Pacific air, and not just that, but you have an area of high pressure out in the Gulf spinning clockwise and advecting some of that warmth as well. So you have this more moderate temperature aloft, and you also have temperatures at the surface that are being advected northward, bringing that well above average temperature regime to a bulk of the country, especially in the central United States. Well, that's all going to change as we see here in some of the models here in a moment. We're going to see this shortwave trough that's out here off the coast of California continue to dig southeast and then eventually eject east-northeast, eventually making its way into New England. Now, why is that important? Well, you're going to see why, again, with our models, this is going to be a really dynamic system. I mean, from all different perspectives, from the synoptic, from the mesoscale, there's a lot really to dissect with this. We could be talking about some wintry precipitation on the order of sleet, freezing rain, even some snow for portions of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and then eventually upstate New York and parts of Connecticut and Massachusetts. These are some states that, we really haven't seen much winter weather yet. I mean, like I said at the top of the video, Chicago, we got snow in Halloween, right? So you guys have been pretty quiet with the exception of some freezing temperatures every now and then. So we're going to see a bit of a change here going into the rest of the week. You might be warm now, but as those temperatures begin to cool over time once we get to Wednesday, Thursday, we could be talking about our first winter system to really impact New England. By the way, we are seeing some snow showers. If we just take a look here on the mosaic, an honorable mention for our friends up in northern Maine, we are seeing some snow showers up near the far reaches near Caribou. But I'm talking about snowfall potentially for areas south of that into portions of, say, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. We're going to get into all that during today's video. So before we get started, If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. Share this with family and friends. And with that being said, we're going to dive right into the video here. So we're going to go first by taking a look at Weatherbell, our good old trusted friend Weatherbell. And this is looking at the North American model. By the way, it doesn't matter if we pulled up the Euro, the GFS, the NAM, even the HRRR. All these models are in pretty solid agreement about the overall jet stream pattern going into late this week. So as we mentioned at the top of our conversation, we have a shortwave trough located out here in the west coast of California. That's going to continue to dig to the east-northeast. Meanwhile, we have that other shortwave feature located just in the northern Montana and Saskatchewan, southern Saskatchewan, right in that vicinity. Those two are actually going to meet. And as we continue to go forward in time, you see these little perturbations, by the way, in our jet stream. That's talking about strong winds that are encountering the mountains. We are expected to see some significant snowfall in some of the higher elevations in northern Colorado, so some of the resorts out there could certainly be seeing some fresh powder. In addition to that, though, I mean, beyond, say, the Rockies, we do have mostly a ridging pattern out here in the Midwest. That's going to keep temperatures still rather warm. We're not going to be talking about 20 to 30 degrees above average once we get to, say Thursday, Friday, but we'll still have temperatures that are, rather above average for this time of year. This takes us into Wednesday, the warmest period of them all. And then as we get to Thursday, watch what happens. You see that troughing feature, right? It's continuing to dig to the southeast. Here is our main jet flow that cuts across the eastern and central United States. And by the way, if you're wondering why our winds get stronger here in the mid-levels, just taking a look at our jet stream, it's because we have a split flow. So this is actually a polar jet that is meeting up with the tropical jet. When that happens, that difference, that temperature difference, actually creates a gradient. And that gradient then translates to stronger winds aloft. That's exactly why we're expected to see winds in upwards of 70 to even 90 knots in the mid-levels once it's all said and done. This is what we would call in meteorology a jet maxima. So let's back up for a second. I think I threw a lot your way to start your Tuesday. All right, so let's begin first in the West Coast to recap. We have a split jet. So remember at the top of the conversation, we have a zonal flow. That's the case as of right now. That just goes straight across. We then will transition to a split flow. So rather than the jet just going from west to east, which is really just our Pacific jet, well, now we're going to introduce both a polar jet and a Pacific jet. And when that happens, that's actually going to strengthen the wind field with height. Remember, right now we're talking about the 500 millibar, which is our jet stream level. We also have an area of low pressure to the north that is going to dig down towards the southeast and thus bring a warm front, cold front component. That warm front, which we'll talk about here in a moment, is really what's going to be responsible for that amalgam of wintry precipitation across New England and the Northeast. If you have any questions, anytime you're watching this video and you're like, okay, what does that mean? Or if I throw too much information your way, go ahead, comment down below. Let me know what questions you have about your area. Again, if I don't cover a specific area in this video that you want me to talk about or I can respond to in the comments, post that down below. I'd be happy to answer all of your questions. That's the setup here in the jet stream level. Let's now take a look at the 850. We use the 850 millibar wind map to diagnose any sort of low-level jet, moist air, or warm air advection regime. So if we go all the way back to Tuesday morning, which is pretty much as of this morning, and extend this beyond, going into Wednesday, skipping ahead here closer to Thursday, look what happens here as we get towards the morning. You see these really strong winds at the low levels? That's, by the way, 50 to 60 knots of low-level winds. We have an area of high pressure that sits right here in the Gulf Coast. That spins clockwise, and that essentially advects both warm and moist air advection. Okay? And so we can actually see here, based on this map, where our warm front is. Our warm front is right on the demarcation between the strongest of that low-level winds. It's right in that vicinity, and this would take us, by the way, into late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. We can actually see here we have a pretty dynamic system. I mean, your low pressure is going to be somewhere within this vicinity, and it's going to have essentially a north to south oriented warm front and a cold front. So that's exactly how it's going to look. Meanwhile, our warm air advection regime, or our warm sector, is going to be right wherever we see these strong southwesterly winds. Anywhere between Pennsylvania, getting back down towards West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. By the way, the area that I circled in blue just now, I'm not worried about you guys as far as wintry precipitation is concerned. Reason being is because the temperatures are simply just going to be too warm at the surface to promote any sort of precipitation that's wintry. That being said, I still think that with the dynamics of this system, that you still will get some scattered showers, maybe even a couple of rumbles of thunder with some of the more intense cells. Not worried about you guys as far as winter weather is concerned. I would be more concerned about folks that live here in New England, anywhere along that warm front. And the reason why is because when it comes down to winter weather, ladies and gentlemen, we've already established that we have cold air to the north. And if I didn't establish it, I'll establish it now. We have cold air to the north of the warm front, warm air to the south. Anywhere that you're ahead of that warm front, well, you have warm air aloft, and then you have colder air at the surface. So it's essentially what we call a temperature inversion. Warm air just above the surface, but my temperature cools by the time I get to the surface, meaning that we can expect to see this assortment of wintry precipitation for folks, as I said, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, by the time we get to early Thursday morning. What's interesting, as you'll see in this discussion, is that it's actually quite difficult to really pinpoint snowfall amounts, freezing rain, sleet amounts, all of that, just because of the complexity of the system. And we're going to get to that here later on in the video. But just to establish everything we know now, right, everything that we learn now, we have a cold front, warm front component, right? So here's our cold front. Here's our warm front. It's essentially going to be north and south oriented, sort of draped like that. It's not going to be west to east. It's actually going to be sort of inverted. It's going to be from north to south. And in that corridor, we can expect to see some wintry precipitation. The question becomes, who's going to get it and how much? Like I said, we'll talk about that here in just a moment. We do have strong forcing in the low levels, because remember, we're getting warm and moist air advection from our high pressure in the south. And if you recall in the beginning of the discussion, we also established the fact that we have a jet stream in the mid-levels that is moving from west to east and is actually very strong in this corridor where my arrow is drawn because of that split flow, your polar jet coupling with your tropical jet. And that's actually causing some really strong forcing aloft. So we have forcing from our strong winds aloft in that thermal gradient. We also have lift from our warm front and cold front. There's a lot going on here that really could produce some pretty, I would say, wild card winter weather for the Northeast New England. So let's dive into that now here and take a look at some of the latest models. And, you know, as I mentioned, because we're looking at some high-resolution models, let's actually stick to that. And we're going to head on over to the New England region. And we'll put on here precipitation and reflectivity type. And I know I just sort of given you a sneak peek on that run there. But as we go forward in time, we do have some snow showers that continue to linger around in association with that low pressure system that's moving through now across northern Maine. Could see some additional backwash snow showers going into tomorrow morning. Would not be surprised to see it. Overall, just some flurries, some scattered snow showers. Not expecting any additional accumulations beyond what we see today. But then as we get into late Wednesday night into Thursday morning, you start to see this snow shield develop, right? And this corridor is actually to the north of our warm front. If we were to draw our warm front right now on this map, it's literally right in this area. And let's actually draw that in, let's do pink. I'm feeling pink as a color today. So let's do pink to demarcate our warm front. So anything north of that warm front is going to be colder air, which is why we're getting snow in places like upstate New York and even back towards, Vermont, New Hampshire. So keep that in mind. Watch the screen closely and just remember This is showing the warm front that we just diagnosed for a few frames ago. As we go forward in time, as we get into, say, really early Thursday morning, you see just this mess of wintry precip. You got sleet in upstate New York. If you go farther north, you have freezing rain. If you go all the way to the international border between New York and Quebec, you're talking about snow and then rain to the south. You got 4 different precipitation types here going on. And like I said, it's because of the forcing we have and really the strong synoptic weather features with this system as to why we're seeing all these different precipitation types. Now, keep in mind one thing. You got to remember, for folks that don't live in the Northeast New England, whether you do or you don't, we have an elevational component to take into account. You're noticing that places like Hartford, Connecticut aren't getting a lot in the way of this wintry mix. Well, it's because the temperatures are likely to be too warm at the surface to promote that type of wintry precipitation. That's not to say, though, that places in, say, higher elevations of Connecticut and Massachusetts and upstate New York wouldn't see some of this sleet, freezing rain. That would make sense because as we increase our altitude, we are also decreasing our temperature. So it would make sense, right? It makes a lot of sense as to why we're seeing most of, or a bulk of, this wintry precipitation pretty much confined to the higher elevations and east of the Finger Lakes in New York. And as we go even further, you see that eventually spread somewhat into northwestern Massachusetts. The snow lingers around in Vermont, New Hampshire, and then eventually that system moves off to sea by the time we get to your Thursday night. It's a pretty quick moving system. Time frame on this is going to be Wednesday night and then eventually getting into Thursday. Certainly want to be on the lookout for that. I'm especially concerned for folks in upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. Again, higher elevations is the concern here. Could be looking at some slick spots. The big question, too, is we don't have really warm or cold soil temperatures and ground temperatures. So I'm not expecting a lot of this to really freeze. You'll see some freezing rain amounts here in a moment, but I would really take those with a grain of salt because that's just what is precipitated. It doesn't mean that all of that is going to freeze. Some of that might even just run off, and you really might just end up with some isolated freezing patches in the roadways. That can be still very dangerous, as we all know. I'm talking to you, New Englanders and Northeasterners. Any black ice or any ice patches in the roadways, and you got a lot of cars out there, I mean, that could certainly lead to some car accidents. So you want to be extra careful on the roadways once we get to the Thursday morning commute. As I circled here on this diagram, on this map, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, upstate New York in particular, Vermont, New Hampshire by the time we get to Thursday morning. Once we, though, get beyond Thursday morning, you notice that these showers really clear out, expecting to see some warm-up, especially along the coastline, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Temperatures should eventually warm into the mid-40s by the time that warm front passes through. The cold front will then move through and cool down temperatures into the evening on Thursday and into your Friday morning. If we look, though, at the precipitation totals, and actually before I do that, I'm going to call a bit of an audible on this video. Let's actually switch over to the HRRR. And the reason why is because I just want to see what the latest run on is with that. Let's see if it goes far out into that time frame. It doesn't, at least on the 18Z. Let's go to the 12Z. That should at least provide us some sort of guidance. Keep in mind it is a little bit of an earlier run. But this is quite different than what we were talking about with the NAM. So think back to the NAM 3 kilometer just now that I showed. You notice that the precipitation on the NAM wasn't as uniform as it is here on the HRRR. It was really scattered. And I think the HRRR has a better handle on this system. And the reason why is I think it's really taking into account a lot of the forcing features that we're looking for. That strong mid-upper level jet, the strong low-level veering, really nice frontogenesis with our warm front development. I think that the HRRR has a better grasp on this, and other convective allowing models like the FV3 and the WRF as well, or WFV3, I believe. Those models have the same sort of output that the HRRR does, and I think it's because they have a better grasp on all of the synoptic scale features with this system. The HRRR shows a much more organized snowfield, precipitation shield, I should say. You got snowfall to the north in upstate New York and Vermont, New Hampshire. Meanwhile, you got a whole bunch of freezing precipitation out towards Massachusetts and even in portions of Connecticut. Same thing applies with this model interpretation too, guys. I mean, we're really talking about, freezing precipitation and wintry precipitation in some of the higher elevations and anywhere that's north of the warm front. So, again, if we're referring to places like New York City, New Jersey, Hartford, Connecticut, or Philadelphia, temperatures I think are just going to be too warm at the surface to really be talking about wintry precip. Keep in mind you're also bordering sort of a bay, if you will, and that's going to also feed in some of that moist air advection we see from that southwesterly flow. Point being, guys, I really think that the HRRR has got a really darn good handle on this, and I would expect to see some higher wintry precip amounts for the areas that you see here marked in dark blue and in pink. As we circled here, we have upstate New York, we have southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, and eventually into western Massachusetts. This takes us still into Thursday morning, so right around, say, 6, 7 a.m. And then by the time we get to the 8 a.m. time frame and even into 10 a.m., we see that snow shield eventually moving north and east into what is now most of New Hampshire and extreme southern portions of Maine and then Massachusetts out towards Boston. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on that, and let's show you some of the totals that we're looking at the moment. We'll revert right back to the NAM 3 kilometer and show you that. I think it's pretty consistent as far as freezing rain precipitation is concerned. It's kind of ironic because as you see here with this map, it doesn't show a really well-organized warm front like the HRRR does, but yet as you're going to see, and you may not see it because I probably won't end up showing the HRRR totals. Actually, I think I will. You're going to see right now that the freezing rain amounts are relatively similar for the most part. And we'll take a look at sleet. So freezing rain, we're talking about nearly 1/10 of an inch, central New York, and unsurprised there, as well as western Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. And then if we look towards our sleet totals, we have about 1/10 of an inch to 2/10 of an inch out towards central Vermont. If we compare that to the HRRR 12Z, let's go back to that run here. You're going to see that we do have some more elevated amounts. I don't expect it to be this high. 1.5 inches of sleet will probably not happen. I think it's going to be more so of a couple of tenths of an inch. I don't think we're going to be reaching an inch here in central New York. I can tell you that right now. And also some pretty elevated amounts in western Massachusetts. We also, though, with freezing rain, you'll notice overall, just like what we saw with the NAM Nest, freezing rain totals just about 1/10 of an inch out towards central New York and some of the higher elevations of western Massachusetts. So that is winter system number 1, but keep in mind this system has to still cross through the UP of Michigan. So we're going to head on over to Michigan now because I didn't forget about you guys. We have to also worry about some wintry precipitation. This same system, as we're going to see right now, is going to start off by moving through the UP. So as you can see, we have quite a bit of snowfall move through in places like Marquette. Let's actually zoom in a little bit here before I get too crazy and ahead of myself. There we go. Places like Marquette, UP of Michigan, even getting just to the north of Door County in Wisconsin, could be talking about some snowfall here as we get into your Wednesday night, Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning. That's going to continue to move through the region. And we're going to see the snowfall totals in this thing, and you might be quite surprised to see it. We have about 4 to 5 inches if we use the 10-1 ratio, and Kuchera is right about the same. So about 3 to 5 inches of snowfall for this area of the country, the UP of Michigan, far northern portions of Wisconsin, and then eventually getting towards Mackinac Island and Traverse City, Michigan could be seeing some snowfall. And some of that may stick too, right? Some of that may stick because we do have, as far as our soil temperatures are concerned, they should be rather cold enough to support that. Let's take a look at that now and see here. Let's go to temperature and soil temperature. And yeah, I mean, at least in the UP, we're talking about freezing, right? Below 32, right around the freezing mark. A lot of that should stick up towards the far reaches of the UP of Michigan. Finally, let's take a look at I think it was the HRRR I was looking at just now. Let's actually look at or I was looking at the NAM before. Let's look at the HRRR now. Sorry about that, guys. Let's look at the HRRR now, and we'll see what the total snowfall is. Pretty much in agreement with the NAM. Actually, it was the HRRR I was looking at. Okay, so the HRRR is about 3 to 5. NAM's a little bit more conservative, showing about 2 to 3. Let's see what the GFS is showing, about 2 to 3 as well. I'm going to say, based on some of the model runs we've seen and that we're looking at in real time, I said 3 to 5. I'm actually going to demarcate that. I'll say about, actually, no, I am going to still keep it at about 3 to 5. Like I said, I think there's going to be enough forcing there to support it. Locally would be the 5-inch mark. If some of the local areas like Marquette could see upwards of 5 inches of snow. Some of the models are being a little bit more conservative. I would actually side with the HRRR and say that we'll probably see, close to about 3 to 5 inches. And even the GFS is showing somewhat of that general range up towards the far reaches of Minnesota and the UP of Michigan. That was a quick whip around, so we do have some winter weather to focus on over the next 24 to 48 hours in these regions of the country. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and like I said at the top of the video, if you have any questions that I can answer for you down in the comments, go ahead and post that comment down below this video. I'd be happy to answer your question relating to your weather for your local area. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next weather video. Take care and have a great rest of your day.